So welcome everyone once more to the webinar, AI and Assessment, Enhancing Integrity, Equity, and Innovation in Digital Learning. So without further ado, I'd like to briefly introduce our presenters for the webinar today. We are joined by Heather Medley, who is an instructional designer at South Plains College, and Paul Morales, who is the Chief Information Security Officer at HonorLock. I know they have a great presentation prepared for y'all today, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen and turn the floor over to them.
All right, thank you very much. Is everybody seeing the screen okay?
Looks like it's still starting up.
One moment here. Let me try that again. Sharing window on another. Just bear with me one moment here. How about now?
There we go. Perfect.
Okay, sorry about that. Little technical issues. Thank you. Really excited to go over the topic today, and thank you, Caitlin, for the introduction. So I think that just to kind of start off with this, it's interesting. Right before we kicked off the webinar, we were talking about how much that we've seen AI evolve over the last few years. Obviously, for those of us who have been following this topic for a while, it does seem very much front of mind right now. But it's really interesting to see that, AI has been something that's been utilized and leveraged for a really long time. And this isn't something that's brand new at all. And I think that the fact that it's rapidly changing, it's really important for us to understand how we can better prepare our students and folks to enter into the workforce. And I think that's what some of the topics we're going to cover today are going to help with that. As everybody knows, AI is everywhere. Tools like ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, they've really democratized AI. And what I mean by that is, as we mentioned, AI has been around for several years, but it's been really isolated to the top tech firms who had access to massive computing power and software skills in order to utilize it. But with these tools, it's allowed this democratization to happen, which really makes it available to anybody in the public. The other thing that's really happening, which is a neat shift, is the fact that it's integrating everywhere. Even if you choose not to interact with large language models, which I know a lot of folks have made that decision early on, they said, that's not something I'm interested in. As you're watching happen pretty much real time, they'll be pretty much embedded into every product you can think of. So I think it's really important that we prepare. And I think part of that preparation is starting to adapt to this AI-driven world. And how do we equip others to, especially our graduates, to succeed in an AI-enabled workforce, because that is what's going to be expected of them. And I think the thing that's on all of our minds is, while we can do all of those things, use AI to take us to new levels that we haven't thought of, how do we actually leverage it with care? There's a ton of benefit that comes with utilizing these types of technologies, but like any other powerful technology, it creates a huge opportunity for misuse. And I think we have to focus on how do we actually develop responsible adoption. And with that, I'll transfer it over to Heather.
So when we're talking about adoption and creating this assessment culture, the first thing we need are leaders that champion AI across the entire institution, not just for CS departments, but everywhere. And part of that is creating space and time for faculty, instructional designers, all of the people who are working on not just curriculum, but everything that we do. AI can touch all of it, but when leaders create time and space for exploration, for sandboxing, for reflective practice, I think a lot of the reason that our faculty at South Plains College didn't adopt early on is because faculty won't touch what they don't know and they don't trust. And we didn't encourage them or give them time to play with it, to try it, to see what would happen if you do this or that, and then to go back and tweak your prompts, see what else happens. So when leaders prioritize that and give their staffs time and space, and maybe even some challenges to go use AI, see what happens, especially when you use all of the different types, all the different platforms. And by doing that, one thing that we've seen also is that policy has to evolve and quickly. Our faculty are asking, am I allowed to use AI to build the course? What should I tell my students about using AI? If I use it, then what do I do? And so campuses need clear and flexible policies that are co-written with all of the players involved. One thing that I've shared multiple times, Sam Houston State, their policy says that all the faculty have to have a policy. So whatever your policy is, that's what you set. That's how you decide what you're going to do in your classroom. So that offers lots of flexibility and lots of ways to be able to turn that policy in to fit your course, and also with your content. Obviously, there are some courses where AI must be used and some where, like English faculty, some of our English faculty shied away from AI for quite a while, and then some of them embraced it. So they all got to write their own policies with a specific structure set up. And that's been really important with shaping this culture. And I think that's one thing that here we have really welcomed is the try and find out, see what happens. And then also co-creating with our students. So as we use AI, coming back and asking them, how'd that go? What'd you think? How did that work out for you? What's your perspective on your end? And then that creates a culture the whole way from our leadership to our students. Everyone kind of gets a say and a buy-in about how we're going to use it together, ethically, practically. What kinds of things are we going to bring forward?
Yep. No, that's a great way to tee that up. And I think it's a really good way to look at that from the theoretical and like what we should be doing. Heather, do you have like some specific examples that you can share with us and talk about some of the things that you've been doing at South Plains College?
So at South Plains College, because we are a community college, we have lots of opportunities to generate some personalized case studies, scenario-based questions. We've got discipline-specific prompts that are encouraging critical thinking, originality. Some of our faculty were very concerned about cheating. So what we did is we flipped the questions. Instead of trying to come up with the correct answer, we're asking students, what went wrong in the process here? How did we get off the rails? This is not following the steps. So what happened? We're using lots of video-based questions now, lots of scenarios. We're putting it into real-world application type situations, not just 1 + 2. We want them to think and to use the information, maybe even to synthesize it with some of the things that they're doing in their lives currently. One of the first things that we did to kind of try some of these things out is we asked students to in our music appreciation classes, we asked them to upload a picture and to talk about how that picture reflects the music that they heard. That took AI out of it. You can't put that into ChatGPT and come up with something. So one of the student responses was a picture in the grocery store of jelly jars. The repetition, they were all jelly jars, but all a little different colors, different shapes. And so the student had to describe what they heard and their image and synthesize those two things. So that helped them with their analysis skills, and they had to listen to the music. So that was really fantastic way to assess their learning. They actually listened to the music. The engagement went up, and the student satisfaction scores went up in that course. That was not the only thing that faculty did there, but it was fantastic. Many of our welders are going to be independent contractors, so we're using AI to help them think about current real world situations. They're using it to help them generate resumes and to build business plans. And we have that now integrated as some bonus portions of their courses, so that way when they step out, they're going to be real world ready. Not just are they going to be great welders, but if they wanted to start their own business, they'll have some of that information as well. We're using chatbots in cosmetology, and they're serving as clients to help students think about their communication skills. We know that lots of our cosmetologists are also sort of therapists on the side. And so the kinds of things that you talk about, the way that you talk with clients, the way that you interact, the way that you handle difficult situations, those cosmetology instructors have set those things up inside the course so that students can practice some of those skills as well. We are also doing AI conversations. Our LMS has some of those functionalities built in. So our chemistry faculty built in a chat bot to review the content. So the father of the flux capacitor, I don't know the chemistry words. She built out the persona to be like Doc. And then the students had to answer, what do you know about the flux capacitor? And it's Socratic. So then the bot would say, well, that's great. Well, what about this? Or what about when you go forward in time? What happens when you go back in time? Not really. Like, I just don't know the chemistry words. But they built out the chat bots to interact. And then the last question was a reflection. How did that go? How did you feel like that interaction enhanced your skills? Are you more ready, less ready for the test? Most of the time, what happened was when the student already came in with a pretty good knowledge of the concept, they were like, well, that was all right. The students who didn't understand it or didn't have a good grasp based on their assessment, they were like, thank you. That was amazing. She put 3 of them in her 16-week course, and the students loved it. That was very well received, and each of her chatbots had a different persona. One of them was her, a really engaged, caring professor. One of them was the father of, whatever the concept was, but it worked really, really well for that class. We're also teaching oh, go ahead.
No, sorry. I think I think those are really awesome stories. I think there was actually a question, and before we got too far along here, just want to address it. Somebody had asked, AI can watch videos embedded in LMSs. I think you have mentioned videos embedded in LMSs to generate answers and what strategies we can use to mitigate this. I know we're going to be addressing this later in the presentation, so I just wanted to kind of acknowledge that question and say it's not being ignored.
Oh, right.
Well,
Yeah.
we'll definitely get to some of the strategies we can use for that, but I just wanted to acknowledge that question.
Perfect.
All right.
Yeah,
And
no,
then,
that's a good point. And it's the questions that you ask kind of afterwards, right? That help for sure. And one of the ways that we're working with that is that we're teaching our technical faculty how to co-create with AI. So they're not really comfortable with their writing skills, but they know how to do the things. So they're using voice to text, talking about their lectures, telling the large language model whatever their lecture would be, and then asking ChatGPT, whatever, to put it into step by step, to put it into like a 9th grade reading level, make it really easy, really consumable. And then they're able to write their own OER materials, especially as quickly as technology is changing industries. That's been absolutely phenomenal for our technical faculty to be able to co-create like that. They're also asking it, give me 10 ideas for active learning activities for this student learning outcome. Write some mock objectives, write some, for especially those bonus modules where they're talking about those soft skills and making them marketable day one. That's been really neat for them to be able to generate some ideas. All still human-centered, all still very with the instructor in control. It's been neat to see their creativity boost because they're starting to ask those questions. Give me some ideas. And then those ideas spark other ideas. And it's been great. But it also has been kind of the Wild West, right? Now everybody is using every tool, everybody's using everything. And so what we've talked about too is a little bit of keeping the main thing the main thing. Why are we using all the tools? What are the tools doing? We don't need every toy at the store. We want things that are going to be very intentional. So we're talking about those kinds of things too as we design assessments with AI, being very intentional and practical when we start to pull those things together.
that's awesome. And I think that actually it touches on one of the other questions that came up about utilizing generative AI to create scenarios for course activities. I think it's a really neat application where you're talking about some of the folks that may not be as comfortable with their technical writing skills or whatever the case may be and utilizing voice to text. I'm always excited to hear of different ways that different groups can approach this type of technology because as you've kind of mentioned and highlighted is it's here to stay with us and it isn't changing. So it's just better to be a part of that process and learn how to iterate with it versus standing on the sideline. So fantastic to hear that.
They're also using it and asking it to give them sources. Bring up sources, and I want some current materials. And they've even put in links to our local news stations because they want these folks who are going to stay in this area and work in this area to understand some things that have made the news recently and how they would deal with these things, especially with our pre-hospital folks, our EMT folks. How are they going to deal with some of the new trends that we're seeing in our area?
Fantastic. And I think one of the things while we talk about that experimentation, transition from like you said, it's the wild, wild west sometimes. I would highly suggest to folks that you find some type of framework for how and what is acceptable for that experimentation. It's easy to get carried away with that if you don't have some type of framework in place and end up in some types of, it could either be a policy issue or an ethical issue or even worst case, like a legal issue. So make sure that you at least develop some type of co-creative framework that's acceptable to your institution and work through that. And I think it's also just to highlight something that Heather had mentioned earlier, but I think it's just extremely important is to as this technology and as this space is moving so quickly, to really create clear and easy to understand guidelines, right? You don't want to be overly specific. You want to give some type of broadness and generality because if you're overly specific, it will be outdated by tomorrow. We all know that. But we want to know broad general guidelines on how AI can be leveraged. And that's not one size fits all. That's something you have to put in that work with your institution, talk with other folks who are involved with the technology. And then I think it's also very important that you establish some types of goals, right? So, what is it specifically that you have as far as an adoption goal? And to Heather's point, don't go off in 15 different directions, right? Focus in on what are our goals and what is it specifically that we want to focus on. With all of that being said, there's actually an interesting question that came through about adopting frameworks for experimentation. Is there any specific ones that I could recommend? I don't, unfortunately, right now, there's a few different privacy-focused frameworks around the ethical use of AI from the ISO organization, but that's not really going to specifically help you with designing and experimentation. It more so creates a compliancy framework for you, and we can share that later on. I don't recall that specific ISO number. I believe it might be 42001, but don't quote me on that. But what I like to do, at least in what I've seen in practice and work, is just using typical system analysis and design kind of principles. So identify a goal. And then if you're doing something, try to create a small enough goal where you can pilot the project, right? And it's not impacting anything that may be production or high stakes or wherever the case may be. And then get feedback. Get feedback from multiple folks, right? Get feedback from your especially get feedback from your detractors by identify you want to have your champions, but really listen to those detractors. That's where you're going to get the most valuable feedback is from the folks that are saying this won't work, it's going to fail. Like there's usually coming from a good place with that. There are some folks that just don't want to see things progress, but those are few and far between. Most folks want to see things progressing in a positive direction. They just have concerns that need to be heard out and addressed. So that would be my suggestion there. So as I kind of mentioned previously, you want to have some type of framework. So like, let's assume that you've done that hard work, you've had those conversations, you've landed on, and what I would suggest as far as the first types of technology to utilize a large language model. For those of you who aren't familiar, that's your Chat GPTs, your Geminis, your Claudes. Those are the chatbots that you're interacting with. They're a great place to start, and it's a great place to understand what that interaction may look like. And then once you've identified what that may be, so you've entered an institution agreement with them, you've had your legal review, make sure you've accounted for all your compliancy and privacy needs. Then your next step would be, I think, investing in some type of customizable option like a custom GPT or a gem. What are these things? They're essentially a set of backend instructions for a AI interaction. So that way, every single time you're interacting with the AI, it's not like starting from scratch. You're essentially setting up a scenario for this AI to operate within, and it will then interact with you with the understanding of those backend instructions. You can even tell it what you want the output to look like. You can reference your SOPs, your policies, your style guides, and your syllabi, which is very useful in higher ed institutions. I think these investments in custom GPTs should really be one of the main things that's on folks' radar as far as things to focus in on right now, because it can help take your institution to another level. And I mean, Heather, do you guys have any examples of that from South Plains?
We do. A couple of things. I see a lot of my instructional design friends on here. You can set up those customized tools based on the courses that you're working on. So you can set up one to work on your history, one to work on your welding. You can set up different personas, different personalities within those. So my welding is very different, the way that it's written, the things that I need out of it, than I would for my history, my governments, those kinds of things. So when you set those up, definitely think about the different ways that you're going to use it, and then go ahead and stay on those threads and those folders to get your continuous output, so that way everything is consistent, not only for that course but also for that department. On a smaller scale, our reading and writing instructors are using it for grammar, and that is helping our students to be able to test out the grammar before they put it in for grading. One thing I do want to stop here and talk about, I'm looking at some of the comments on the side. Just remember, good pedagogy is good pedagogy. So that should also be your framework. Think about your objectives and how you're going to teach the students to be able to demonstrate mastery of those things. Regardless of what tools or whatever else is out there. There was an uproar when we got calculators. It was a big deal when we got the internet in the beginning. Email was a big uproar in education. We have ridden these waves, and good teaching is good teaching regardless of the tools that we have. It's still about person to person. It's still about making sure that the main thing stays the main thing. So as we're creating these customized tools, use them to your benefit and help them to be more personalized, to streamline the efforts. I know that when I grade a stack of papers, sometimes the 15th one, it's different than the first one. So to help me be consistent, I've used some AI tools to help structure those things, to help create rubrics, to help keep me on track, to be able to provide some more personalized feedback, because sometimes after I get into the stack of papers, my paragraphs become shorter and shorter and shorter. And so the student in the middle of the stack doesn't get the same personalized attention as the first one would. So being able to use some of these tools for me is also wildly beneficial. One thing that I did for me is I set up some regular customizable, what are they called, Paul? Every day I get an email that tells me some of the things I'm searching for in the news. And every day I get those ideas, those topics. And so it pulls it all together for me. And that saves me a ton of time. I'm not going and looking at all the different news sources or all the different newsletters. I told it exactly where to look, what I wanted to see. And every day I get those at 9:32.
And it's almost like a digest.
Exactly. And it does it for me. So that saves me a lot of time, and it goes out and searches for me. So then I'm able to surf those things very quickly and be able to give those things that, again, human-centered, human in charge. I get to give those things to our faculty that I feel like would help them and benefit them right now. I want to give them things that they can turn around and use in their classrooms immediately.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And there's actually been quite a few great questions coming through. So let's address a couple. Somebody had asked, how do we get a customized AI LLM, for instance? So essentially, as we kind of mentioned, it depends on the different platform that you're using, but most of the different offerings out there, your main offerings, your ChatGPTs, your Geminis, your Claudes, depending on what your institution lands on. I keep emphasizing that because that's very important. We don't want anybody to get into any issues with experimentation. All of them have a back-end way within your account to start customizing the back end of that AI. So I would first suggest like figuring out if your institution has that. Do they have that agreement? If not, what are the steps towards moving towards that? And if they do, what is it getting in there, starting to interact with it? I wouldn't say custom GPT should be the first thing you do. First, interact with the chatbot, get a little bit of an understanding, and then as you get that understanding, start to delve into the customization once you have a good base understanding there.
And most all of them, you can go to settings and you can kind of look around, and also Google, right? Google how to do it on the platform that you're using. And a lot of times there's great information out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a few other questions that are quite, I think, are quite in-depth questions. And I almost think these are things that warrant further discussions or even sessions in and of themselves. So, like, we're definitely, I'm seeing those just for the sake of time. Some of them are a little bit more in-depth in as far as the conversation around them. And I wouldn't want to, not address them properly, but we do need that. We only have limited time, so I'm going to go ahead and advance here. But please keep sending in questions, and we'll definitely do our best to address those either now or at a future date. All right.
So we have a community of practice. We have several here at South Plains College, but we've created a community of practice of people who are actively interested, actively using AI. And so they can share how they're doing it. They can share resources. They can share ideas or trouble spots. I encourage you guys to create a community of practice on your campus as well. People who are in that thought realm, people who are thinking about how, when, to use it on your campus, people who are maybe instrumental in writing your AI policy. That way you can stay ahead of the curve and you can share some of that mental load, some of that responsibility, and then also to help collaborate. It has been amazing to see our faculty sharing ideas about how they're doing some different things because of what they've learned and the feedback they've shared. We all know that our students are not just my students, right? They're also in other people's classes as well. So when we're able to kind of think and move more quickly because we've had these shared experiences, it's really, really been beneficial to our students. So we host regular department workshops. We host an ongoing AI faculty community of practice. We demo new tools. We discuss ethical issues. We share classroom tested strategies. And last semester, we had an entire workshop series where we brought different people in on Zoom and things like that to talk about things that are happening in AI, different studies, things like that. But AI is going to disrupt assessment. It already has, right? So we want to be able to plan ahead. And it's changing and moving so quickly. This community of practice has been really beneficial for our faculty to see you're not alone. We're all here. We're all thinking about the same things. And some of them have really stepped up and said, look, this is what I did. This is how it works. Here's how I can share it. And we are a Blackboard school, and we have created an organization so that they can actually share their well-written prompts, some of the assessments that they're doing. And it's been fantastic to watch them collaborate together.
And how often are you holding those types of sessions? And the other thing is, like, what's the typical demographic or attendance of those types of meetings?
So our community practice for AI is about every other month, especially because they're doing the things, right? We want, so we have different topics, different kind of guiding questions, and they're always online, always virtual, because we have 5 different campuses. So we want to be able to give them the ability to join if they can. And we like to keep it small. We're a small school anyway, but I would say we probably have 20 to 25 folks in there, which is really great for participation. We do it for 45 minutes at lunch, and that's it. So come and eat and talk, and we want to keep them very small on purpose.
That's a great point. That's a very good point. I was actually involved with running a pilot for an organization where we did something very similar with about a 20-person pilot group. And I agree with you. If you start to get larger than that, you can start to run into issues and problems with either gathering feedback or having cohesive feedback because there's so many different angles and directions to go. So I think it comes back to keeping the groups as, as small as you can. You want to be inclusive, but also be very careful of boiling the ocean. And this this type of technology and this type of growth and rapid advancement can very quickly lead to a situation where you feel like you're trying to boil the ocean, which nobody wants to end up in. But it's very easy to happen. I think to your point, Heather, that's what I think when you hear about faculty feeling that overwhelmed feeling, it's because they're trying to solve it all there, and it feels like it's resting on their shoulders. And I think it's awesome that with that community of practice approach where you're sharing that load, you're sharing the fact that like, yeah, I'm running into these challenges, I'm running into these frustrations. This is not a perfect science, right? This is something we're all navigating real time. So I think that's
And
great.
to help with those frustrations, one thing that we've encouraged faculty to do too is pick the pain points. Don't start with the whole course redesign. Pick the pain point. What is the assessment that's not working? What's the assessment that isn't clicking? What's the lesson that you don't like? Everybody has a chapter in their textbook that's it. It's not fun for you. It's not fun for engagement. So let's start there. Let's pick that one thing and make a change. Do the thing, then poll the students. How did it work? Put the guy down the hall in your class. Let him go through it as a student. See how it works. Make sure it makes sense. And then poll the students. Did you like it? How can I make it better? Ask them. They have great input. They have really good feedback. It's been nice to see how that works, but just start small. Pick one thing. How are you going to fix it this semester? I've taught many times where I get into it the next semester and I'm like, oh, I meant to change that. I didn't change it in the master. So when I copied my course, it was the same thing that went off the rails the last time. So pick one small thing, and that helps with that frustration as well.
Awesome. Thank you. So, Heather, how are you handling the complicated topic of the ethical use and providing that clarity to faculty, staff, and students? I think that question was also asked earlier where somebody had referenced, unfortunately, it sounds like somebody lost their job because they were utilizing a large language model and not saying anything about it. But it's a tough topic. How have you guys been handling that?
So in our framework, in our template, in our LMS, we have an AI statement. Tell students you've used it. This is how you've used it. This is why you've used it. And this is how they're expected to use it or not use it. And why, some of those rationales. There's a sheet there, and we've given our faculty some examples of that, some templates. We've also given them some templates for prompts, things that they can use so that they can think differently about active learning. Lots of our classes have moved online. Lots of the classes that used to be taught only face-to-face, we figured out ways that we can do that so that way we can service our students in a broader service area. And to do it well, we're working on those engagement practices. So having AI as a partner to be able to come up with some of those ideas and to start some of that thinking has been really, really well received by some of our faculty, just to say, how do I do this? Give me 15 ideas. And then to go back and rewrite it and say, okay, now we did this, what about this? If we did this, what would it look like this over here? How could we integrate these concepts into it as well? And then they keep kind of honing and fine tuning it until they take it out and get something that they really want to test with students. But we start that early on. Also, HonorLock has a course and they provide examples scripts for faculty, academic integrity in the digital age. We have a course that we've customized for South Plains College like that faculty can go through on their own time and work through some of those things, some of those ethical use situations. I don't want to put anything off that's not mine. And I also use AI to check, because when I proofread my own stuff, it says what it's supposed to say, not what it actually says. So I've also put it in and said, ask me questions. What about this is not clear? Where else can I fine tune? Where else can I add some more information for clarity? Or are there links and resources that I need to add? And it just is a partner to read it before I have a neighbor next door read it. So that's been really good, but just to be upfront. We want them to use it. We want them to be able to be practitioners when they leave here. I feel like if they don't, we've done them a disservice. If they're not ready to use AI in ethical and responsible ways, it's not going anywhere.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. And I think like, have you found any ways that you can very simply in a very direct, concise manner get it across to them, like utilize this, but don't let it become everything that you are? Like what are you using to get across like the future generations, the future folks that are going to be in the workforce when you have such a tempting piece of technology to be able to leverage?
Especially here, especially at a rural community college, I tell our students, you've worked too hard to get here. Do not give up your seat at the table. Do not let something else take your voice. You have worked too hard and you have too much to offer. If you use it as a partner, if you use it as a tool, that's very, very different than you letting it just take over and take over what you've learned. I also have this example that I use with students. I bring out a rubber band and I ask them about the qualities and the purpose of the rubber band, what's it supposed to do, and what will happen if I leave the rubber band right here on my desk for a year and I don't touch it. They all know it gets brittle. And when I try to pull it, it will fall apart. It will disintegrate. But if I continue to stretch the rubber band, it will work for years and years. The same thing is true for my students. The stretch is where they grow. The stretch is where they learn. And if they don't stretch, it's not useful anymore. It doesn't do what it's supposed to do. And college is supposed to stretch you. College is supposed to help you to think in different ways. And if you choose to step out of that and not to think, then that rubber band that sat on my desk for a year, it doesn't do what it's supposed to do for you.
Yeah.
So there are some of those kinds of analogies that I'm using because I want them to remember their seat at the table and their purpose as a rubber band to hold things together. They've got so much to give, and they have a reason for being here with us, and we want them to be able to accomplish that when they step out of here.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And I think there was actually a question that was very similar to that. Somebody had spoke about the cognitive debt study that MIT did, your brain on Chat GPT. And they actually, I mean, it was a great question. There's a great question here where they're asking about how do you suggest strategies and policies to design assessments that maintain that intellectual engagement. I think it's exactly to your rubber band analogy. And like I said, there's been so many great questions that I've seen come through. That's almost one that I think warrants its own time.
Yeah,
Or
that would
maybe
be
we could talk
amazing.
about doing something like that because I'm sure there's tons of stories that you can share with that. But just want to acknowledge that question and acknowledge that tie-in and that it is, yeah, it is something that you have to think about and be very cognizant of. And hopefully in the future we can definitely revisit and do that topic some justice. All right. So another question that kind of came up and it like I said, fantastic questions. Everything's just kind of tying in, which really makes it an engaging topic to speak about. But another question that kind of came in is that sometimes we've talked about some ways to assess, have them analyze a calculation or analyze a situation or a problem. But somebody brought up the fact that like sometimes we just need to assess if a student knows how to do a calculation, right? And that's a very viable situation. And in those situations, most oftentimes AI is not an option or a tool that can be utilized. So I think that we're going to kind of touch on those pieces here. I think that early on, so about November 2022, when ChatGPT was released to the public, everyone kind of had their own idea of how it may affect academic integrity. But we truly didn't know what the real threat to distance learning or remote testing would be. And we thought it was going to be people being able to go to a website, very quickly, ask a question, get a response. And one of the interesting things being at HonorLock in the integrity and an assessment space is the fact that like it's a very simple problem to solve when it's just a matter of saying, hey, we are going to block a website, right? We're not going to allow you access to a website. Most companies are doing things in this space. That's very easy for them to do. But what we actually found when we started to watch how students were actually taking assessments and trying to cheat on those assessments is the real threat to remote testing would come in the form of an extension. So essentially, for those of you who may not be familiar, an extension is something that sits within the browser and it's able to, in most times, most of these extensions are configured to where it can screen scrape whatever's on the screen. Somebody had mentioned, well, it can watch a video and respond, or it can read the questions that are in the test or respond. How do you deal with that? Well, that's how these extensions essentially cheat. They will read the question, a student hits a button, and that will then provide the answer, right inside of the LMS. So oftentimes even highlighting what the correct answer may be. So what we did at HonorLock is we really focused on, okay, what are these extensions? How are they developed? How many are coming out on a daily basis? And what can we do to help prevent and block those? And that was a key focus for us for quite a while, is how do we track and block these extensions? So we have a myriad of different ways that we actually track these extensions, including actual operational security, where we're watching it in certain essentially backdoor chats that are going on. There's a lot of this is being shared with social media. Unfortunately, it's even getting to the point of where some of these extensions are utilizing affiliate programs. So that's how we're seeing the majority of the cheating actually happening. Not somebody going straight to ChatGPT. They're actually going to an extension or utilizing or installing an extension and using that to cheat. Now, once we implemented this extension block for these cheating extensions, what we actually noticed, which was very interesting, is as the student came to the assessment the first time, they maybe had this extension turned on. We would notify them, let them know that was not allowed for them to proceed into their assessment. And for the most part, on the second return to the assessment, most of these folks did not come back with the extension either turned on or installed. They acknowledge the fact that, hey, this is being seen, it is being monitored, it's being watched and blocked. I am going to go ahead and do my assessment the correct way and not utilize these types of extensions. And in addition to that, there's been some newer developments. I'm sure a lot of us have heard about the Google Chrome and homework help and those types of things. And when there are tools that are utilizing the side panel, the actual will now be flagged and the screen will be blurred. And we detect that built-in browser panel like Copilot or that homework helper and go ahead and block that out also. So there's this constant evolution of new tools that are being released, new folks figuring out ways to take advantage of those tools to do things that are legitimate and do things that are illegitimate, and how we can go ahead and block those types of things. And Heather, have you seen something similar on your side?
Yes, and we're using HonorLock in many different ways. HonorLock is holding our students accountable on low stakes assessments, so that way they can try it out and kind of practice how this is going to go. We also are using HonorLock to simulate what it's going to be like for them to take these credentialing exams. So even if it's proctored live with your faculty in the room, they still add HonorLock on there as well, because that's what it's going to be like in their testing environment. So they want students to be so used to it that it's no big deal. We're also using it for some off-brand cases, right? There's some things where students need to demonstrate their skills, and instead of having them, come in on a separate time, each one different, our music faculty, for example, are allowing performance-based situations so that it helps the faculty to stay organized, because all of those videos are just right there. And then when the students come in, the faculty have already heard them perform and are ready to get them to the next step. So that's been really interesting for our faculty to use those those demonstration kind of cases. We also are using it in our education, where we're asking students to explain or describe kind of a live storyboard so that the students are teaching, because we know if we're thinking about Howard thinking skills, if you can teach it, you know it. So that's been fantastic, but they're doing that through Honor Lock and using that recording capability there, so that way when the student's ready, when the student is comfortable, they can do it in their own situation, in their own settings, and that's been really nice. Our speech folks are using it so that students can practice and play it back. They can see their voice and their inflections. So that's been interesting, a new kind of a study guide, if you will, before they actually have to do it for their groups and their partners. There's no way that it's catching everything. We had a situation yesterday where a student was talking and clearly talking to Alexa the whole time, and they tried to get away with it, and the faculty was able to go back and have that important, very difficult conversation with those students. And I think that's one of the really important pieces of this. If you can detect and block your AI tools, or use Honor Lock in some different use cases and different scenarios, be the human in charge. That's one of the greatest things about AI. Be the human in charge. Go back and have those conversations. You set the expectations up front with transparency and honesty on your side. So then go back, revisit with the student and say, what can I help you with here? What did you not understand? How is this? We had a English as a second language student who didn't feel comfortable in his writing in a writing class. The faculty met with him. She talked to him, helped him understand his role in that, and how this was meant to help him and not for him to kind of skirt the situation. And his writing the rest of the semester was really well done. They had some things to work on, but they both were willing to do the work and to put in the effort. I encourage you to be the human in charge and go back and have those conversations. That was one of the best things for that student, is to have the conversation with that faculty and help restore them into the class, to help them understand what it means to be a participant in the learning, and your responsibility as the learner and what you need to bring to the table. So even if it blocks, even if you watch, even if all the things, working with that student to help them understand their roles. A lot of times our students are cheating because they don't feel confident. They don't feel like they have anything to bring to the table. So having that conversation with them and saying, I believe in you. You're in here for a reason. And as long as it takes, like, let's work on this together. We're partners in this. Let's figure it out together. And as long as that student's putting in the time and the effort, most of our faculty are really, really willing. We have a tutoring center, all the different pieces that go with that. It's been nice for them to see how students have responded to those difficult conversations.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. And with that, I think that, as far as looking at it from the world that these folks are walking into, like Heather said, South Plains is putting a ton of effort. And I know a lot of other institutions are putting a ton of effort to equip their graduates or folks coming out of their programs with the skills necessary to enter that workforce. And oftentimes it's hard to see what that actually looks like from academia. We can hear stories and read about it on the news and those types of things, but oftentimes it's easy to get insulated from that, unless you're getting that direct feedback. And I can tell you that prior to this, I've been in multiple industries. The biggest thing, like even with my last roles with an aviation defense company, and we did a lot of manufacturing, automation was that threat to the person working on the manufacturing floor. And the conversations that we would have with those folks is like, look, I know you really want to just use your hands, and you only want to do this the way that you learned how to do it 20 years ago. But the challenge is that efficiency and automation is the future. And I don't think that's far away from what AI is. AI is just an extension of that, right? How do you get further? How do you get more efficient? How do you get more automation? How do you do more with less? And I think that's the trend that I've been seeing in the workplace is I don't think that there's just going to be a max exodus of folks from the workplace. What I think is going to quickly happen is that organizations are going to demand more from smaller, more efficient teams. And I think the real way to prepare for that is utilizing tools like AI, utilizing technologies and frameworks like automation in order to make them more prepared to kind of enter that workforce and the demands that are coming with that modern day workforce. If they don't, I don't think they're going to necessarily be exited, but they will get left behind. And that's the truly concerning part, especially as to Heather's point, you work so hard to get here. Don't let it take your voice. Be present, be a part of that conversation, just have your seat at the table. Heather, what are your thoughts on that?
And they have to know how to use it, right? I mean, your voice can be the one that's building those prompts. Your voice is the one who has to start the interaction with AI, right? You're the one who has to come up with an idea to go to the website to do the things. So continue to think, continue to be creative. If we don't prepare them for the world they're going into, just because they know the circulatory system isn't really going to help them, right? They have to know how to apply that information and that knowledge. And in the situation that they're in, being able to bring and recall that knowledge very quickly. You're not going to have time on an ambulance to say, hang on a second, let me ask Google what I'm supposed to do right here. Let me take a picture of the situation. Let me come back to it. They're going to have to be able to have very quick recall and be able to think creatively a lot of the times, to figure out what to do and how to do it. And again, to work with less, right? You've got to figure out who the people are that are on your team that are going to help you be able to do that. That's why the community of practice is so important. That's why asking your students for their feedback is so important. Being able to go back to the table and retool it and tweak it just a little bit. When you know better, you do better, right? So when you get that feedback, how are you going to be able to implement that and kind of make it better? We have some faculty who still have their old overhead projector films. When you know better, you do better. And not that the films are bad, right? Like, it's the interaction, it's the teaching, that's the technology that they're using. But how else can we supplement their learning? What else can we do and offer them that's going to make them incredible practitioners out in the workforce? That's why they're at college, right? They expect to be able to monetize this experience and to do something with it. So not just about teaching them what AI is, how to use it, but also how to monetize it, how to take it with them into the next phase of their journey, their learning goals. Because just because they leave college, they shouldn't stop learning, right? We should
Yeah.
continue to learn and grow. That's why we're all on this. And I'm seeing this amazing chat. I appreciate this so much. These thought leaders here really thinking and digging into what this means. I appreciate that so much from the folks that have joined us today. It's really, really impressive.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a good way to kind of tee it up and open it up for a few more of the questions that we have here. To Heather's point, thank you so much. That just such insightful questions. Some of them I think definitely require and give some really great ideas for some deeper dive topics where we can have that community partnership and we can talk through how we tackle some of these hairy, challenging to navigate problems. But one of the questions that I saw here, somebody had asked, blocking extensions in websites doesn't prevent the use of a different device. What do you suggest to prevent that? Perhaps proctoring live is our only choice at this point, especially in online classes. Thank you for the question. I'm not sure, to the person that posed the question, I'm not sure if you are using a solution, if you're using something, I can speak to what HonorLock does to deal with those types of things. And we utilize an approach and a technology called multi-device detection, where we have an algorithm that has different methodologies on how we can pick up on another device being used. If that's something that you haven't heard about or you're interested in hearing about, please let us know. We'd be glad to actually walk you through and show that. I don't want to belabor this presentation with that, but there are ways to handle that in a remotely proctored situation. So there are solutions for that. It's not something that has no possible solution. They're quite creative. Somebody had asked, do we have any plans for when AI gets to the point where it can create live interactions of videos that can interact with an online teacher for them? plans for AI gets to the point where it can create live interaction videos of students? Heather, I don't know if that one's tracking a little bit more for you.
What I think is that we already have things like Khan Academy and some other things where you can go off and get your own learning. But I think the credentialing and the modeling that we do at institutions of higher education like this, that person to person, those live classes, those face-to-face interactions, not just with the instructor, but with the other people in the class, those things are invaluable. I was in college a long time ago, and I still remember some of those interactions as core memories. And we all know, right? That's why we have entire departments and divisions that are dedicated to the experience, because it's really, really important inside and outside the classroom. I just don't know that we'll ever be able to have anything that will replicate that.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. It's definitely a great point. Somebody else had asked a little bit earlier on about their concern as far as using AI ethically in the development of curriculum and assessments, and how are you acknowledging the use of AI in syllabi and materials? I'd be glad to chime in on that. I would rather, Heather, do you have any real world that you can share on that one, how you're handling South Plains?
Yeah, in our Start Here folder, we have that AI statement that talks about how we've used it, why we've used it, where we've used it. And then we also tell students how they're expected to use it in each class in those situations. Some classes are not at all. Some classes you can use it, but you need to tell me what you used it for. And some classes say you can only use it for your framework to create your ideas. The rest of it has to be you. But those things are in that Start Here folder. And those things set the tone and the idea for the entire class. Again, it's per class. But we ask our faculty to set that standard. What is cheating? How are we using it here? What does it mean? And then to revisit those as those assessments come up where you are expected to use AI in different ways. That's said right there. It's that TILT framework, right? It's the transparency in learning. We're letting them know up front, this is how and this is why we've used it, and this is how and why you will use it and when.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. There was another question, a very specific question from Dr. Singh here. Do you recommend utilizing AI and Moodle-based vocabulary tests? Do share your thoughts on AI for vocab development and assessment. It is very specific. Heather, I don't know if you have anything that you could comment on that one, or if you have any experience in that space.
I don't, not for vocabulary. Most of our folks who are doing vocabulary, they're using it in integrated ways. And it's not necessarily AI driven, although we've had some faculty who have come up with some kind of drill questions so that they're used in some situational based kind of things. Some of them have even used it so they kind of Amelia Bedelia the words, where you put the wrong words in the wrong spaces, and then ask students to straighten things back out. And if you would use this word here, what would it mean then? To kind of make it more situational. But writing out a definition, we don't have many folks who still do that. They want them to be able to utilize the word.
Okay, no, that's helpful. And I know, once again, we're at the top of the hour now. I want to be respectful of everybody's time. Heather, thank you so much for talking through this with us. And thank you so much to everybody that's been in attendance and all the great questions. But I'll go ahead and hand it back over to Caitlin to close us out.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you both so much. Paul, Heather, for sharing all of the amazing examples. Wow, so much to ponder and to dig into. Thank